You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and joining me today, as he does every Friday for a Ferg Friday, Justin Ferguson with the Auburn Observer. What's going on, dude?
I'm doing all right, man. Finally, this is the last one of these we're going to do before an actual game week, so that's super exciting. I'm ready to actually talk about stuff that's happening on the football field because this offseason, as eventful as it's been, and as good as it's been for business, and as good as it's been for podcast, man, let's talk about some stuff that's actually happening on the field, the stuff that people will remember.
Is this – I think you can make the argument this is the last podcast that you and I will do this offseason.
Yeah, this is it, man, and it couldn't come at a better time. I am kind of up to here with my with everything with this, whatever this alliance is of the conferences,
right?
Just chatter about what is this season going to look like? Predictions and all that. I'm tired of all that. Let's see what this thing's going to look like, because the one thing we do know, Auburn's the least predictable team in college football. So let's just sit back and see what this is going to look like.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun for sure. So, Jay Ferg, Charlie 5 and I were talking about this earlier in the week on the show, and he brought this up because we were talking about some guys who are guys that maybe are flying a little bit under the radar through fall camp. TD Moultrie came up. We both said TD Moultrie, kind of inspired by your response of maybe he could be a starter at one of those outside linebacker spots when it's said and done with this a week ago. And he brought up a question, and he's like, I would love for somebody that knows football better than me to explain why this scheme, why that outside linebacker position in this Derek Mason defense fits him better than the Buck position, because we both agreed it seems like there's more to do, and it's a tougher position to do than the Buck position in the Kevin Steele defense. So could you kind of give us some insight to that?
Yeah, I think the main thing you have to remember with TD Moultrie is he was a 5-star linebacker. He was not a defensive end. He wasn't even an outside linebacker. I mean, he played kind of in space all over the place when he was at high school at Jackson Olin in Birmingham. And Auburn got him and wasn't sure, is he going to be – is he more of a linebacker in this scheme, or is he more of a defensive end? They move him over to end, Buck, and let him go to work. And the thing with Buck at Auburn – sometimes you did some more stuff, but it's pretty much just a defensive end that stands up. A defensive end you can be a little bit more versatile with in the pre-snap with the way you move around and do things. This new defense, you are running a 3-4 outside linebacker. So you see it all the time in the NFL. You see it very, very often at Alabama. Georgia's done it as well. And so at Auburn, they have the stud, and then they have the rush end and then the stud end. So there's going to be, on most plays, when even though you have 3 down linemen, say, early down, 1st and 10, they're going to throw the ball. You have 3 down linemen, you have your 2 outside, your edge guys, and your 2 middle linebackers in that 3-4 scheme. Most of the time, if you're going to rush the passer, you're going to send those 3 defensive linemen, and then you're going to send just one of the rush players, of the edge players. That's usually the rush guy. Now, the beauty of this defense is that it's versatile. Under Kevin Steele, that defensive end spot, that Buck, you were on one side. Just imagine having 2 Bucks, basically, and you don't know who's coming and who's dropping. Now, of course, you can send 5. You can send all 5 there and blitz and that. But, that standard 3-4 rush, one of those guys gets involved. The other one drops back in coverage, takes takes a tight end, does a variety of things. And what they want in this defense is that when a defender gets when a quarterback gets to the line of scrimmage and looks across, they don't want to know him to know who's coming. Because the thing about Kevin Steele's defense is kind of how I felt about Gus Malzahn's offense at its peak, where it's like when it works and it's super efficient, kind of what's coming. They're gonna rush forward, and have 2 over the top. They're gonna play press man coverage on the outside. This is gonna be a little bit more varied, where it's like, you get to the box, you don't know who's all coming, who's all going, and for a guy like TD Moultrie, I think it is tapping into some of his background as a linebacker more than a defensive end. His time at defensive end at Auburn that is an adjustment he had to make, and he's had some injuries. He's had some consistency issues. I think moving him back there, and when you hear things like he has been one of the leaders at the edge spot, I think it's him tapping into his history of playing a position where he got to use his athleticism and he got to, do some more things than just pin your ears back and go to after the quarterback, which is something nobody'd be surprised if he was really, really good at that. Yeah. But it didn't really click for him at Buck. And I think what the thing about him at edge is I think he's just getting to do a little bit more. And that goes back to I think it goes back to who he was as a linebacker coming out of high school.
So you're anticipating him doing a lot more off ball than the guy on the other side of the defense?
I think what they ultimately want in this defense is that whoever you put out an edge can do both. That on one play, this guy might be lining up on this side. He might be the rush guy, but he might be the guy who drops back in coverage. They want him to be able to do both. They want Derek Hall to be able to do both. We watched the spring game. Derek Hall went out and covered a slot receiver on a play just because of the way the alignment worked out.
Don't love that.
Spots. Yeah, it's not something you want to do a ton, but it's like, okay, are you comfortable enough doing that so that when we have a certain play call in place, you can adjust, you can react, and it's not so predictable. It's like, well, this guy's on the field. All he's going to do is come after the quarterback. Or this guy's on the field. Yeah, he's more of a linebacker. We're not going to necessarily see him a lot coming after the quarterback. So it gets really interesting. We talked to Chandler Wooten and Owen Papo on Thursday.
Right.
And one of the things that stood out to me is they said, well, we've got a set where all three of those linebackers, Owen, Zacoby, and Chandler Wooten, are all on the field at the same time.
They love that too.
And you can think, okay, is it more of a 4-3 look, or is it one of these things where they drop into that, four-man, the pass rushing package where you just say, all right, Owen, you're the edge guy. Tear it up on the outside. So I think it's going to be that versatility, that mixing and matching that they really want to do more than anything else.
So let's keep playing this game in that base look where there's two inside linebackers, and we assume it will be Owen and Zacoby most of the time, at least to start the game.
Right.
Who do you think gets sent more between those two guys? Do you think Owen gets sent more or Zacoby?
If you go off,
I mean, blitzed on the call.
Right. Yeah. If you go off of last year, it's Owen. Owen's speed and his power for a guy his size is very hard to deal with. I mean, he was tied for the team lead in sacks last season. I think if you look at things like PFF, he was one of their highest graded pass rushers, right up there with Derek Hall. Derek Hall had a really good pressure rate last season. I think, but and they didn't do it a ton in the Kevin Steele scheme, but when you do blitz Owen Papo, he can get home because, I mean, my word, he's that fast and he's that strong, and offensive linemen might not be fully prepared for it. Now, it's not something you're going to do every single play. That's why your pass rushers are usually bigger guys.
But you want the offense to be thinking that they could, right? I mean, that's kind of the whole, the mind games part of this defense.
Yeah, and there's going to be some plays where they'll send a safety. They'll send a smoke Monday. They'll send a nickel like Donovan Kaufman or Ladarius Tennyson. And then the other outside linebackers have to drop. It's just it's an unpredictable type of scheme. It's very similar to what I think they're wanting to do on offense, where it's you got to be ready for everything. All right, on defense, you got to be ready for everything. And that takes time. That takes patience. That's a big work in progress, especially on the offensive side of the ball, I think, from what you're coming from. But it has the potential to really, really work. And I think that's why these first two games of the season being what they are for Auburn, tune-up games, I think is going to come in handy.
Today's show brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar ever. I got a salted caramel bar right here next to me as we record. Delicious.
And picked it up and put it in front of the camera. That's right. That's good ad placement right there.
I'm trying to get used to the YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and then order a Built Bar. Go to built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. All of them taste delicious. They look and taste like a candy bar, but they're good for you. High in protein, low in calories. Great stuff. Built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15. Jay Ferg, what's going on these days at the Auburn Observer?
Man, we are busy. We are busy. So Wednesday's talk with Bryan Harsin, some interesting stuff about the quarterback position. Wrote about that on Thursday.
Yeah, I read that this morning. That was an interesting take you had.
Yeah, interesting spot. Like, again, could just easily be Bo's the number one guy. We'll go into the season. It's, as we predicted. But it's close to the year, the door is still open. And I think that's pretty fascinating. Got a story up today if you're listening to this on Chandler Wooten, and not only his journey to get back on the team and be a captain, but also just how much he means for that linebacker group to have another veteran guy behind, really two excellent linebackers, like we said earlier, Owen Papo and Zakoa McClain. And also, weather permitting, everything permitting, I think at this point, Saturday afternoon at the open practice, we're going to do the same thing we did in spring ball with the open practice. And we are going to have live updates on the Observer. So if you're a subscriber, you'll be able to get access to them, kind of read just my live coverage of what I'm seeing going on the field at Jordan-Hare Stadium. It'd be a great time to sign up if you get on it. And whenever those go live, every subscriber will get an email. You get the link to hit it, and you get to watch it, on your phone or your app of choice, for web browsing. So yeah, so we've got that, and next week's game week we'll be rolling strong into that.
I know a lot of listeners that are pretty active in the Locked On Auburn Discord signed up. I know several did when you did that live chat.
Oh yeah.
So we'll ping everybody again Saturday morning and tell people to sign up if they haven't already. So that'll be awesome. And
because I didn't say it then, auburnobserver.com, $6 a month or $60 a year gets you on board. And it's a good time to go because game week, we're running full speed, all the way to the end of basketball season, really.
Right. And another thing people people ask me all the time, hey, can you ask Justin this? Can you ask Justin that? Access to one of the greatest minds around Auburn sports.
Too kind.
Auburn Loyal 95 and Locked On Auburn Discord. And if you want to join the Discord, I will put the link in the episode description down below. But it says, I have a question for the pod. It's probably good for a Ferg Friday. Everything's good for a Ferg Friday.
Yes.
They ask, what does a successful week 1 game look like against a team like Akron?
Great question. I think, the big thing is that I don't know if there's a number you want to hit necessarily. I don't know if there's a score you necessarily want to get to. Of course, the best case scenario, offense looks great, hardly ever slows down, defense throws a shutout, right? Like that's exactly what you want. But I think the main thing for Auburn in this game is all 3 phases, go off without too many, issues, right? Because there's a lot of new stuff to this. And one of the things Bryan Harsin talked about on Wednesday is that second scrimmage. One of the things he really liked is that there were not very many penalties from the offense. I think he only said 1 from the first team offense, and it was really good third down. So it's just that process, that execution of, okay, we're not expecting you. I don't think anybody should be expecting Auburn to look all world on both sides of the ball. Akron's bad, and that'll, sway some of that. But I think mostly is like, all right, when a successful game 1 for Auburn is if you watch this game and you see all the newness on offense and defense, and no, it's not going to be perfect, but see it and say, all right, here's the foundation. This is different. This is why this could work. Building for it's about setting a tone. I think these first 2 games, setting a tone, establishing that proof of concept, and then building on it as we get into games where there's more competitive opponents. I think early on, all 3 phases, can you get things done, and can you show the fan base and show yourselves that the new way of doing things is gonna work.
Right. I agree with you. Yeah, and we've talked about this throughout the week a little bit. Like, what do you expect to see offensively? Do they open it up? Do they do vanilla stuff? Does it even matter? Because they're going to kind of change what they do from week to week. It's kind of the strength of what Bryan Harsin brings to the table, as well as Mike Bobo. But yeah, you think around 40 rushes? Is that kind of where we're thinking? And then maybe 15 to 20 passes from quarterbacks. Is that kind of the right realm that you'd put stuff in, or would you move it one way or the other?
I think they'd want to try to be close to 50-50. That's what we saw in the spring game.
Okay.
I think balance is going to be very key for them. And it's not necessarily – balance is not necessarily you run it 50% of the time and you pass 50% of the time. But it's like we can do what we want to do on any given down. And I think people want to see Bo Nix show some progress. They want to see if any of the other quarterbacks get in the game, which is a possibility. They want to see what they're capable of doing. You against a team like Akron, you don't have to break out all your tweaks and razzle dazzle or whatever you want to call it to put up some numbers that people will like. This offense is going to look very different. They are going to be taking snaps from under center. That does not happen very often at Auburn in recent years. And I think just the way they're doing things, you don't have to open it all up for it to look a lot different. And so I think that's probably what the tone's going to be these first couple of games, because this base looks different than the base that we've been used to for the last more than a decade for the most part.
How about speaking of under center? How about that comment from Nick Brahms?
I love the fact that and I'm busy on Wednesday night, so I didn't get to hear Tiger Talk live, but I do enjoy the fact that they're letting players be a part of it. That's
cool.
Really cool. And so Auburn fans, if you watch the videos that we put up, I'd say we, not me, but like the other outlets put up of the interviews, you can get a taste of it and you can see it. But I think the more that you get to hear from these guys, if you're a fan, the better, because there's some really good personalities and really good interviews on this team. Right. And, the more that gets in front of the fan base, I think it's really cool. Not just something that somebody like me can just tweet quotes from. I mean, getting to hear them and hear directly from them is going to be really cool. And Brahms was very Nick Brahms in his first one. And so that's what makes him such a good one.
And for folks who don't know the quote that we're talking about, this Nick Brahms talked about going under center, and he's like, I feel bad for Bo because towards the end of practice, like, we may need to put a towel down there is the gist of it. And I'm like, that's funny. That's really funny.
And that's an adjustment. And Bo
funny.
Yeah, that's an adjustment. Bo talked about how much, being under center is different, because when in high school, I mean, he probably hardly ever took snaps from under center. Yeah. I know the same thing with TJ Finley and Demetrius Davis as well. So like that is an adjustment. And so it might not look pretty all the time, and it might be a little gross, but towards the end of the game, but I think they'll get used to it.
Yeah. And we heard reports early into spring that there was a little inconsistencies with the exchange, but haven't heard that really in fall unless you've heard otherwise. So that's a good thing.
No, it was something that they spent a lot of time on in the summer. I think they saw in the spring where it was an issue, and I think all the quarterbacks wanted to get as much extra work as they could at it, because it's just it's a completely different way of doing things. Whether it's the handoff or getting your drops for a pass, the footwork's different, the lines are different, the timing is all different, and so it was something they really, really stressed this summer. And I think we're hearing less of they're having a hard time handling the snap. So that'll be interesting to see Saturday. I'll be curious to see how much team offense stuff we get to see and what it looks like when they go under center.
Yeah, let's talk about the open practice in just a second. Today's show brought to you by BetOnline. It's the best place to bet on all of your sports action. Head over to betonline.ag today, and you can get on the action. A lot of futures, a lot of win totals, all that good stuff is up right now. betonline.ag, and you can get a 100% welcome bonus on that deposit. All you have to do is use promo code LOCKEDON, and they will bonus you those funds. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Justin Ferguson, Auburn Observer. Yeah, so most people will be listening to this on Friday. Some people may be listening to this on the way to Jordan-Hare Stadium for the open practice, which I've brought it up to a lot of people that follow Auburn football, and they're like, wait, is that open? Like, we can go to that? Like, I don't think they've done a super great job at promoting it, but we talk about it here every day. But it's what do you think we're going to see?
Yeah, I think also part of the can we go to that? I think some of it with Harsin testing positive for COVID and that. I think some people are like, wait, are they still doing that? Because I know that
Harsin will be there, but you can.
Yeah. Yes, you can. You are allowed to be there as long as you're safe and healthy. So what we're going to see, I think, going back to what we've seen in the past, these last practices before game week, it's not a walkthrough, but it's kind of like it. It's going to be I think, at least, I think you're going to see a lot of Indy. I think you're going to see a lot of stuff that what we saw in Indy, meaning individual drills. I think you're going to see some team stuff. But, this close to the season, they're not going to be, throwing the hammer down out there on people, and may not be as much 1v1 stuff, and stuff like that. But I think it'd just be a good time to see, okay, well, here's where these players are. Here's where these players are. Here's where they're working. Here's how this is all kind of coming together in spots. I think it'll be just a good way for fans who are there to kind of get acquainted with, this is what this looks like. This is what this offense is going to like. This is what this defense is going to look like, because the spring game gave you a taste, and they've only added more and more to it in the months since.
Yeah, as far as value in regards to information and insight, what can folks going to this take away? I mean, just who's with the starters, who's Bo Nix throwing to the most.
I think it's gonna be a lot of that because that's the thing I always come out with at practice. Like that's the stuff that kind of seems more, and you might want to see like, okay, they're working on these specific things in drills. Some things that you might like. I think Auburn fans will be excited to see the tight ends on Saturday and see that as much as we've seen them in fall camp, everything they've done, every practice we've gone out there, they have made an emphasis to get the ball to those guys. I think people are going to want to see stuff like that. But yeah, to me, the big takeaways are like, all right, who's with who's playing where, what does that look like? And know that it's not, locked down that's going to be what it is a week later when you get to the Akron game. But yeah, I think it's very much going to be kind of like, oh, okay, well, this is where this guy fits in and this guy fits in. And it'll be interesting because Bryan Harsin gave us like half the depth chart the other day. So it'll be interesting.
What's up with that? I mean, he gave us a 2 deep on the offensive line. He went out of his way to be like Donovan Kaufman starts. And if you question that, I'm going to have a problem with it. It's like, okay, we get it.
The man gives more detail than a lot of coaches do in their press conferences, right? He's a talker. He has long answers, but like you can get really good information out of it.
Yeah.
So I mean, shout out to those on that call that were like, "Hey, how about this position?" And it's just like, I mean, he was literally looking down at a depth chart, right? We didn't get access to that yet, and that might not come around until next Tuesday or whenever they have the press conference, but. I mean, they had it, and he was not hiding from it because I think other coaches would be very, very secretive of that. And all credit to Bryan Harsin for giving us that information because I know a lot of fans and a lot of people like me loved hearing it.
I love it. I think it's great. I think it's awesome, and it's like we're gonna know in a few days anyway. So, do you think it says anything about like how definitive he was about Donovan Kaufman? I mean, that dude must be killing it. I mean, he was very passionate about telling us that Donovan Kaufman was the guy.
Yeah, he said Donovan Kaufman is in the starting spot at nickel. And this is where, if you read my Thursday newsletter, this is where the Bo Nix thing gets interesting because it's like, well, if we were playing right now, Bo would be the starter. It's like, okay, well, you're not, and there's still time left. The fact that he was very definitive with guys like Donovan Kaufman, and not as much of the quarterback position. Again, I think anybody listening to this, most people listening to this, and both of us are on the same page here, it's probably going to be Bo, and unless something goes wrong for Bo this year, it's probably going to be Bo all the way through the season. Mm-hmm. But the door is still open. Meanwhile, on the other side, they're already like, yeah, Donovan Kaufman's got it. Tony Fair is going to be – like he said all of those transfers are going to be in the 2 deep. And that is – I mean, he mentioned Ro Torrance. Like, Ro Torrance is a guy that we're hearing more about recently. Like, that's, I think that's just an easy win. That's an easy win to just give people information like that.
Well, so he went from Donovan Kaufman directly into by Darius Knighton. Didn't say Darius Knighton was a starter, but he said he was in the mix, I think was the word that he used. So is Zion Puckett the starter there now?
And I wonder, it's in the mix. My take on the safety situation is you're going to have 3. You're going to have 3 safeties, and it's going to be a rotation. Now, Smoke will probably be the biggest chunk of that rotation. But I think by Darius Knighton and Zion Puckett, I think you're splitting hairs really on who can end up being starter. I think from what I've seen and heard in camp, I think it could be close to 50-50 now. However, that doesn't mean like one has to be the starter, one's not going to be the starter. Somebody's got to be out there for the first play. But I think their snap count could be very similar. And the fact that both of them could spell smoke at their position, they feel confident enough that both of those guys could play both safety spots. I think is very telling. And then a guy like Ladarius Tennyson can drop back there as well. I think Ladarius Tennyson is going to be really cool. And I said this on our podcast this week that came out on Wednesday night. I think Ladarius Tennyson has the potential to be like the great X factor for Auburn's secondary this year. He strikes me as a situation like Nick Coe was in 2017, where it's like, all right, you might not be the starter, but buddy, we're going to get you on the field. And like, you can play here and you can play here. I don't think there's a position Ladarius Tennyson can't play in the secondary. And you can move him around to all these different spots. And I think you need guys like that. And so that safety position is interesting because outside of those 3, it's like, well, who's next? newcomers for the most part,
right.
young guys like Amari Harvey and Caden Bridges. So I think that's where Tennyson's going to play into it as well. And he's going to still get a lot of playing time, even if Donovan Kaufman's the guy at nickel.
And that's New England Patriot great Nick Coe to you, sir. Just pointing
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The dime package is going to be ridiculous. And like, I assume the lone backer in the dime package is Owen, which can also cover and move extremely well. It's just like, man, you can do so much with that.
You can do a ton with it. And the dime and even the nickel is going to look really interesting, because if you hear Derek Mason talk about his views on the nickel, he's like, well, sometimes we want a guy who's more of a slot corner, and sometimes we want more of a third safety. Well, you've got a room where you can do all of that. And so it's going to be mixing and matching. I feel the only thing I feel like super, super confident in this season, where I'm like, this is where this guy's going to be no matter what in the secondary. I think Smoke's going to be in his normal spot, that strong side safety spot, or, I even get screwed up on the terminology there. And I think, Roger McCreary is going to be outside at number one. Everybody else, you can move around and go inside, out, back, forward,
Jalen Simpson, like. I mean, he's pretty tied into an outside corner role, right?
You would Drayshawn Miller, those guys like Ro Torrance, like that. But among the key guys, I think there's going to be a lot of mixing and matching. They like the way Pritchett can move. They like the way Tennyson can move. Obviously, Kaufman and Knighton and Puckett can move. I think Smoke can even move a little bit around, at least between the two safety spots.
I like the idea of Smoke in the nickel close to the line of scrimmage. I think Smoke Monday is good at a lot of things. I think coverage far away from the line of scrimmage is the weakness of his game. And I think if you scoot him closer, I love that.
And Smoke, I mean, interesting things coming up here for him. He's big season coming up. I think he could be a really one of the top safeties in the SEC this season. And it'll be interesting to see what people think of him at the next level, because his former partner in crime, Jamin Sherwood's now a starting linebacker for the New York Jets. So that versatility, I think, is going to be really big. And this is a defense that is going to be even more versatile than what we saw Steele run in the past across that back.
Oh, yeah.
6, 7, 5, 6, 7, however many dudes are going to be on the field.
It's going to be crazy. Justin, give us the rundown again of the Auburn Observer. What else is going on? How can folks sign up? All the good stuff.
A lot of newsletters out this week at auburnobserver.com. You can check that out. Sign up there. $6 a month or $60 a year gets you access to everything new. Go straight in your inbox. Have a couple podcasts per week as well. Live updates, weather permitting, availability permitting, Saturday afternoon. If you want some live coverage of what's going on at Jordan-Hare, you can tune in there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, brother. Really appreciate it. We'll be back on Monday. I may put a pod up over the weekend recapping the open practice. I don't know. Possibly. But definitely we'll see you Monday. It'll be game week here on Locked On Auburn.